Good afternoon. My name is Mariam Manakbi. I'm a student at Anwar Qurqash Diplomatic Academy. With me today we have a prominent guest, a distinguished diplomat, His Excellency Pierre Vimont. His Excellency is a senior fellow at Carnegie Europe and a trusted source for European foreign and security policy. The subjects of his research are the European neighborhood policy, transatlantic relations, and French foreign policy. He served as the special envoy for the French initiative for a Middle East peace conference from March 2016 to January 2017. He had previously been appointed as the personal representative of Donald Tusk, the president of the European Council, to oversee the preparations for the Valletta conference between the European Union and African nations to address the causes of illegal migration and combat human smuggling and trafficking. Prior to joining Carnegie, His Excellency was the first Executive Secretary General of the European External Action Services from 2010 until 2015. He held the positions of Ambassador to the United States from 2007 to 2010, Ambassador to the European Union from 1999 to 2002, and Chief of Staff to 3 former French foreign ministers over the course of his 38-year tenure in the French Foreign Service. He is the Ambassador of France, and honor granted on a select few French professional diplomats once in their careers. Your Excellency Pierre Vimont, welcome to Anwar Qurqash Academy. We appreciate having you today with us. Grand honneur de vous avoir avec nous aujourd'hui.
You speak a perfect French. Congratulations.
Thank you. I would like to ask you some diplomatic questions based on your diplomatic experience. So I'd like to start with, why does diplomacy matter, and do we still need diplomats?
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me to this great diplomatic academy, which is very impressive. Both the building, the students, and all the discussions one can have here are very inspiring, I would say. So congratulations and all my best wishes for the future and your future. Do we need diplomats? Yes, I think so, more than ever. We are in a more conflicting world than ever before, with confrontation everywhere, new challenges of a different nature than it was the case before. We talk a lot about a world fed by multipolarity, which means more players in the diplomatic game. We see now open war in Europe, which was not the case. War of that nature between two states hadn't happened since 1945, and the European Union was precisely built upon the assumption that there would be no war anymore in Europe. So of course one may ask the question, do we need diplomats? What we need are military people, soldiers. But yes, we need diplomats, because to end those confrontation at the end of the day, we need diplomats to bring everyone back to the table. Diplomats, in my opinion, are not made specially for, fair weather. They're here for storm, for difficult periods, for when you're facing and hitting a wall and you don't know how to get over that wall. This is what diplomats are for. So, in my opinion, diplomats are needed more than ever. But we also have to understand that as the world is changing and a new international reality is stepping in, diplomats have to change their mindset. They have to change their tradecraft. They have to change their toolbox. They have to adapt to this new reality. And that is a little bit of a revolution for the diplomatic trade, I think.
Thank you. What are the most significant ways that tomorrow's diplomats need to differ from today's diplomats?
I think one of the main differences is that if you try to summarize the new reality of the global world today, is that for diplomats, they are facing totally new challenges that they didn't know a few years ago. Digital revolution, the major challenge of the climate change, the new economic situation evolving and developing in something completely different. So that's the new challenges. There are new actors also moving into the diplomatic realm. Diplomats used to discuss with diplomats before. You had conferences where the only people around the table were diplomats. This is not true anymore. Now you even have a lot of international conference where you have representative from the NGO world, the non-governmental organization. Mm-hmm. You have representative from the world of enterprises, of companies. Private business is, you have the need more and more to listen to what researchers have to say, for instance, with the whole issue of the climate changes as it is going on. So new partners are stepping in, and diplomats have to recognize that new reality also. And then you have a sort of new toolbox stepping in. You know, diplomats about 30 or 40 years ago had no competition from social networks that didn't exist. But now you have all these new channels of communication with a constant flow of information moving all around the world at high speed. And diplomats who used to take their times to write dispatches and you know, to draft papers and assessments and analysis for their leaders now are facing the competition of constant social network feeding, of huge flows of communication everywhere, disinformation also moving in. So that is destabilizing the whole diplomatic trade. So here again, I come back to what I was saying earlier. There is a need for a real revolution, a genuine revolution in the technique of diplomacy, in the way we analyze the world around us, in understanding this new reality that we're facing and adapting to it on a sort of constant daily work.
Thank you. What are the three most important characteristics or skills of a good diplomat, and which ones do they most commonly lack?
I always used to say to my students at Columbia University in New York, where I teach every year, that one single asset, in my opinion, for diplomats is the capacity to listen, to listen to others. It seems obvious, but it's not all that obvious. Diplomats more and more get instructions from their headquarters, and therefore now more and more they tend to just, you know, put out, voice out their instructions and not listen to what the other sides are saying. And therefore the capacity, the ability to listen to what the other ones are saying and to try to reach out to what they're saying, that doesn't mean that you know, you can't stand up and defend your own position and your own interests. This is what diplomats are here for. But at the same time, listening to what the other side is saying and trying to take it into account, that's the whole purpose of the game. It's therefore listening to the others. That, for me, is the first asset that a diplomat must have, the skill that is needed. Then the ability to understand the reality around you, to make the right analysis about the political forces, the diplomatic forces that are at work, the ability to put the right analysis on what are the drivers of ongoing international situation. That is, secondly, for me, very important. And the third thing, which is maybe what is missing the most today, is the ability to be innovative and creative, and to some extent to get out of the traditional processes and to go and look for new fields where new ideas could pop up, where innovation and imagination could step in. The risk of the diplomatic trade in the past has been, to some extent, to always try to get back to the traditional processes as they exist, and to hope that by just sticking to these processes, one will find solution. It seems to me, in a world that is changing on a daily basis, diplomats have to change also, and have to be more innovative than they are today. What is lacking? Maybe precisely the courage to be innovative, because let's be honest, to be audacious requires a little bit of courage. To think out of the box, to be more creative. Usually in diplomatic circles, people don't like imagination. They prefer to stick to the traditional pattern of the diplomatic trade. And I think today we need to be to show a little bit of bravery, to get out of the traditional path and to look for new roads for diplomatic improvement and diplomatic progress.
Thank you. Yes, I feel like they have to show a bit of bravery, but like they have to go with the flow as well.
Yes, but maybe, in a world which is accelerating all the time, this idea that diplomacy could rely on time and buy more and more time in the hope that something will change and will change in a positive way. Maybe this has to be looked at again, because if you look at some of the most recent crises we have been facing in the last 10 years or so, look at some of the major crises in the Middle East, Syria, Libya, even close to the Emirates, Yemen. Time is not on the side of diplomatic progress, diplomatic breakthrough. On the contrary, crises seem to be dragging on and becoming more and more complex, more and more entrenched in strong opposition with no way out of it. So it seems to me that my advocacy for imagination and creativity is more relevant than ever.
Thank you. What would be your one key message to diplomats starting out on a diplomatic career?
It would be keep confidence in the diplomatic trade. I hear more and more people telling me diplomats are useless anymore today. Diplomacy has shown during years and years its inefficiency. I hear a lot of people telling me, can you just mention one big diplomatic success in recent years, either in the international community or on the domestic front for national diplomacy? And it's true that because of the complexity I was referring to a few minutes ago of all the world around us, it is becoming more and more difficult for diplomats to strike a deal, get a success. Even today, when you're able to have a success in one field or another, if you look after a few years, you see that success has slowly crumbled down. Now, in the session I was having a few minutes ago with the students, I was alluding to the GCPOA agreement with Iran between the 5 permanent member states of the Security Council and Germany on one side and Iran on the other side. And we all were rather happy and content with the agreement that was reached in 2015 because it looked like a major breakthrough. And then we have seen after a few years that unfortunately that agreement has just been sidelined by the US administration, then President Donald Trump. So it's difficult to see many successes at the moment in diplomacy. But therefore, for young people who still want to get into the diplomatic career, I would say don't think that this is a dead-end street. More than ever we need diplomats. As we see more and more conflicts around the world, there is a need for diplomats more than ever. So keep faith and go ahead. But what is true is that this new young generation, to some extent, will have to rekindle diplomacy, will have to revisit, to reshape many of the diplomatic tools and many of the trade craft of diplomats. And this is why I think it is very exciting, because there is a lot to invent in the future with regard to the diplomatic field.
Thank you. Can you share with us an example of successful diplomacy that you have witnessed? And tell us what, in your view, made it so effective?
I was thinking about this a few months ago when I was asked more or less the same question by some of my students. And of course I could have said, I've been working on the drafting of a few treaties of the European Union, the Maastricht Treaty in 1992 that brought the monetary union and created the beginning of what became the foreign and security policy of the European Union. I have been working also on other treaties, and recently on the Lisbon Treaty. I have been implementing the European External Action Service. So I could say, listen, all these are successes. And yet, looking back with hindsight of all of this, I also see the shortfalls, the fault lines, some of the difficulties that are there, the weaknesses of all of these, and therefore the impression of mixed feelings at the end of the day. And so thinking about this, I was wondering whether at the end of the day, the success I feel most proud of are the most simple ones. The one that had to deal with a rather simple matter, for instance, release of hostages. Because that's concrete, that's practical. And I have succeeded with many of my colleagues, we were several working on this, in releasing at some point in Iraq several hostages, journalists, French journalists, or also hostages in Afghanistan, etc. And at the end of the day, this is where I got most satisfaction, because we brought these people back and it was tangible. You could see the result. And after all, I was thinking maybe that's the true satisfaction is there in that kind of tangible result.
And now I'd like to ask you a few more questions related to the United Arab Emirates. So, as diplomats, one of our tasks is to improve the image of our country to fellow diplomats, and within the country we are accredited to. Could you tell us how you can do this most efficient, and how would you say the UAE is perceived abroad?
Well, regarding your country, the United Arab Emirates, I think you should be proud of it, because I think the image of your country has been improving extraordinarily in recent years. And, nobody is contesting anymore the regional role and influence of the United Arab Emirates, being perceived as a regional player and a major actor. This is something that was not there about 10 years ago. And the fact that your leaders have been able to display that kind of leadership and moving in the whole region as a major player has been quite impressive. Not only in the Gulf, but looking at Africa, for instance, North Africa, the Horn of Africa. This has been a significant change, and therefore now I think when from the outside of the Gulf region we are looking at this region and looking at the different players with whom we should develop a relationship of a strategic nature, for instance. Emirates comes out as a natural partner, and I think that is an important change compared to a few years ago. So congratulations.
Thank you. What would you say are the current challenges within the European Union, United Arab Emirates relations?
I would say the main challenge is for both sides, and certainly from the European Union perspective, is to enlarge our partnership over the what was during a long time the single issue of trade relationship and economic relationship. I think for too many years in the relationship between the European Union and the United Arab Emirates, it was all about trade, free trade association, how to improve our trade relationship, maybe more generally our economic relationship. I think now we have to go, and I think this is understood on both sides, but we have to go for a more geopolitical dimension of our relationship and our exchanges. You know, the European Union wants to become a real, significant, genuine geopolitical player. This is what the President of the European Commission, Mrs. van der Leyen, or the High Representative for Foreign and Security Policy, Mr. Josep Borrell, are stating day and day, every day I would say, Europe wants to be a geopolitical actor. Great, and therefore it must have a strategic dialogue with your country on geopolitical matters, and more than anything else on the whole issue of security and stability in the Gulf, but more importantly on many important issues related to the overall region of the Middle East, where, as I was saying earlier on, your country wants now to be a major actor. Europe has to recognize that and to become a natural partner when geopolitics need to be discussed. We have definitely a partnership to enhance and comfort and shore up as we go along on that issue. The security of the whole Gulf region is going to be more and more relevant and an important topical issue as we go along. And I think the two partners, Europe and the United Arab Emirates, have a natural partnership to enhance and increase as they go on. And if they can find a common way of looking at the issues, security issues there, and find a way forward together, that will be a major asset for the stability of the region.
To follow up on that, on which fronts do you see the European Union, United Arab Emirates relations progressing over the following 5 years?
I would come back to what I was saying earlier, to go further down the road than only looking at economic matters and looking at the whole geopolitical game in the region and around the world to see how together we can move forward. You know, what we're witnessing today is this increasing confrontation, competition between not only the United States and China, but also Russia is being there. and to witnessing this feeling that this confrontation between these global power is reducing to some extent the room for maneuver for other players. How to regain some capacity to steer the discussion towards something that will not be that very single competition between three major global powers, but to be able to open the geopolitical game to other players that can come in and bring their own vision of the world today, and who, for instance, could show that on top and above and beyond this competition between global powers, that are other ways of looking at this situation. And one major feature, one where I think the United Arab Emirates and the European Union could bring a useful contribution, is this whole ongoing thinking about how to revisit the multilateral order, the world order as it stands since 1945. And we all see that this world order is being under attack, being very much criticized by many countries around the world. They are being sometimes called by some US academics as the global South. This criticism coming from countries from the global South, or countries that at some point were part of what was called the non-aligned movement, etc. These criticisms have to be taken on board by Western countries, and that we should be in a position where leaving aside or taking into account the ongoing competition between the United States, China, and Russia, we who are other players in this world game are able to come up with new ideas to revisit the multilateral order, to improve it, to give it a new momentum, where all countries will feel comfortable because their interests are being taken into account. This seems to be, for the 5 years to come, this seems to me to be the kind of objective on which we could jointly work, bringing in our own sensitivities, which are not exactly the same, but coming back to what I was saying earlier, listening to each other, listening to the criticism that may come from one side, accepting the need for change, revision, reform. That would be quite useful, and maybe a major contribution to this whole international multilateral order. Goes from reform of the UN and the Security Council to how to implement the Sustainable Development Goals that have been adopted a few years ago but are still struggling to move forward, working together on climate change. Here in the Emirates, climate change is becoming a major issue. It's the same in Europe, where we're facing a terrible energy crisis, the need for a transition towards cleaner energy and renewable energy. We have a lot of expertise and experience to share together and to move forward for the benefit of all, for the benefit of the whole world community. And this is where I think we could work together, and that would be a very useful contribution to the new multilateral order that needs to be pushed forward. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So with that, I would like to thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you.
You're such an insightful person, and it was a pleasure talking to you, and hopefully we see you again.
Thank you for inviting me, and I wish you all the best in the future.
Thank you.